The WNBA playoffs are here. The WNBA playoffs are here. And today, I'm here to preview and break down one of the most intriguing first-round matchups. Jenn Hatfield is here, and she and I are going to dive in to the East Coast battle, Mystics versus Liberty. The series begins this evening. The Locked On Women's Basketball Podcast. It starts right now.
Ogunbowale for the win. Good!
You are Locked On Women's Basketball. Your daily podcast on women's basketball.
Hello and welcome. You are locked onto women's basketball. I'm Jackie Powell. I am one of your Friday hosts. I cover the New York Liberty at The Next, which we are the staff that puts on Locked On Women's Basketball. And being a New York Liberty beat reporter is going to be very helpful on today's show. Thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. And remember that Locked On Women's Basketball is brought to you by us at The Next. We cover women's basketball all the time, and we tell the stories that need to be told every day. You can subscribe now to support the staff at The Next that works so hard to bring you this coverage that matters so much. It is $9 a month, $72 per year. Also, we have been breaking records here at Locked On Women's Basketball. We continue to grow each month, and that is because of you, dear listener. Remember, Locked On Women's Basketball is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and many more. Today's episode is brought to you all by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more right now. New customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Last time we were together, dear listener, I had Rowan Shaberg on, and we talked about the Mercury and the Storm, two teams that missed the playoffs this year after consistently making them for years. But today, Jenn and I are breaking down why the Mystics and the Liberty's best-of-3 series in round one of the WNBA playoffs might be the matchup to watch in the first round. I know on night one of the postseason there were two blowouts. I think we could both say confidently that we do not think that that is happening in this series. So, in segment one, I'm going to ask Jenn about why the Mystics really like this matchup, because it's worked well for them. And then in segment two, I'm going to discuss how the Liberty can counter what the Mystics have brought to them. And then in segment three, we're going to talk keys to the game, X factors, and even a little bit of predictions. We're going to predict who walks away going to the semifinals. So Jenn, thank you for coming on. I think where I want to start is, what did we learn from this matchup during the regular season?
Yeah, I think we learned that we are going to get a really great series between two teams that have a lot of star potential and can play in a lot of different ways. I think both teams are versatile, have a lot of weapons. And I think it's going to be a really exciting matchup across the board, whether you like offense, whether you like defense, whether you like bigs, whether you like guards. There's kind of something for everybody here.
Absolutely. I mean, this series was 2-2, 2 wins and 2 losses for both teams. One of those games went into overtime. Another one was won on a buzzer beater. Both were at Barclays Center. Just when the Mystics come to Barclays Center, there is just drama. That is just a thing. In the post game, Natasha Cloud, or the post game on Sunday, the final day of the regular season, Natasha Cloud and Slim, aka Brittney Sykes, they said something really interesting. They talked about how much they like this matchup. So why do you think that was? And what sort of reporting have you done around the team this week as they get ready to understand why they like this matchup?
Yeah, and the first thing I'll say here is they say they like the matchup, and they don't mean that in any disrespect in any way toward the Liberty. They have made clear that they think the Liberty are a great team, and that they really respect everyone on that team, top to bottom. Sandy's a coach, so it's not we like this matchup because we think we're going to blow them out or something. It's more looking at the top 4 seeds. There are a couple things. First of all, Slim and Tosh are competitive as they come, right? They want to play one of those top 2 seeds. They want to test themselves against the WNBA's best. They like the idea of going up against a super team. So just from a getting their competitive juices going standpoint, that they like this matchup for that reason. Now, looking at the matchup on paper, they also like that, as do their teammates. The team that they don't really want to match up with is Dallas, because Dallas has such a big size advantage on pretty much everybody in the league, but especially the Mystics, who are going to be without 6'5" starting center Shakira Austin. The Mystics really don't have the size to match up evenly with them, which isn't to say they can't beat Dallas, but they would have to get creative to be able to go up against their 2 6'7" players and more height behind that. So they're kind of breathing a sigh of relief in that respect, just from a not having to dramatically twist around their game plans to accommodate a mismatch. And then I think if you kind of look up and down the personnel, the teams are kind of similar in ways that help you kind of defend that or figure out ways to go against it, right? Like Elena Delle Donne is going to have Brianna Stewart for much of this series. And, those are 2 pretty similar players. Like if you're like, who can I pick in this league to defend Brianna Stewart? Elena Delle Donne's a pretty good choice because they're like very similarly versatile players, similar size. Like that's a pretty good kind of comparison that you can stack up against each other. And kind of like going around the roster, you can find points of comparison there. And so the Mystics feel good that they can mostly naturally match up with people pretty well. And also that, they have the star power to compete with New York. So it's really just kind of comparing the rosters and saying, okay, we can do this. Like, we don't have to get crazy here. So it's that and their competitiveness, really.
For sure. I mean, I think the Mystics are uniquely poised and positioned to match up well against not only New York, but also against the Las Vegas Aces.
Yeah.
In that on both of the 2 super teams, there's quite a potency from the guard position, and the Mystics are the perfect counter for that because their backcourt are some of the best defenders in the league. Mm-hmm. And I think part of the issue in last season's playoffs is that the Mystics were matched up against the Storm, fell in that best of 3 situation, and then the Storm fell to the Aces when most people were like, well, wait a minute, the Mystics could have challenged the Aces. So I definitely think that is part of the equation as well. Just how that backcourt just makes things so difficult for offenses. I mean, you wrote a piece recently on thenexthoops.com, which was a playoff preview, and it was entitled "The Washington Mystics Are Excited, Confident About Ideal Playoff Matchup with the New York Liberty." I will attach that preview to the show notes, folks. But Jen, in that piece, you really explained what the Mystics defense does to potent offenses.
Yeah, the defense started off the season really strong, and then as most listeners probably know, the Mystics got really injured, we can say, for a good chunk of the regular season. But now as they've gotten people back over the last few weeks, with the exception of Austin and also Christy Tolliver, who's out with a torn ACL, they've started to find that defensive cohesion again. And, getting to answer your question on the perimeter in particular, getting Ariel Atkins back from a broken nose, that really kind of cements their perimeter trio again of Sykes, Cloud, and Atkins as, man, no team wants to go against that. Like, to put it bluntly, no team is like, oh boy, I get to go against Sykes, Cloud, and Atkins tonight. Like, that's just like the stuff of nightmares. All of them are really good. All of them kind of do it in different ways too. So you can arrange matchups based on like those strengths. It's not like they're, all three the same and just kind of do the same thing and kind of predictable in that way. Like, they all have different strengths. Eric Thibault likes to use a football analogy for this, calling Cloud a shutdown corner and Atkins a free safety, and Sykes is kind of every position wrapped in one defensively. So they're all different and their strengths complement each other. And then inside, Elena Deladon's an underrated defender. Mike and Eric Thibault both have been saying this for a couple of years. She's gotten a lot better on that end over the years. She wants to be good at it, and she's gotten very good at it. And then, when you have Shakira Austin in there, that's just a lethal starting five. Maisha Hines-Allen will probably slide into that starting spot for much of the series. The Mystics like what she's been able to do with the starting group, and her defense is also very much improved this year, which we can talk about more later if you want. And then, they've got some good defenders coming off the bench. So they've got all these individual pieces who are really good defenders, and they're starting to click now again after going through all these injuries that shuffled their lineup. They're getting most of those pieces back, and they've had time to work on it and time to make sure that all of the, kinks are ironed out, and which is really important too. They've talked about how you can't hear anything in Barclays. Like, the crowd is so loud that they like can't hear each other. So they've talked this week about, Maisha Hines-Allen said this week, and she's known for being kind of a loud person, but she was like, if you think you're being loud, you got to be a little louder. Like, we got to just turn it up, because it's going to be a playoff crowd in there and it's going to be loud. So they're kind of all just coming together and finding that defense again.
Wow. I mean, that Barclays crowd was quite rowdy on Sunday, so much so that Natasha Cloud waved to the crowd. Yeah.
Gotta love the confidence, right?
Oh, no, it was brilliant. And I mean, I think you even told me that it was more sort of like hat tipping to them because, she really enjoyed that energy. That was energy that motivated her.
Oh yeah, so, she loves a good road crowd.
Yes, she does. Coming up, we're going to talk sort of about how the New York Liberty are in position to counter the really stout defense of the Mystics and also just their motivation level. I mean, we'll get into what we saw on that final Sunday, the final regular season game of the year. But first, I do want to tell you all about our friends at FanDuel. Get ready for the NFL season with incredible offers from FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Plus, all customers who bet $5 will get $100 off NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. Now is the best time to join FanDuel. The app is easy to use and you can be on everything from player spreads, player props, and more. So visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season with an offer you won't want to miss. Also, visit FanDuel to take a look at the money lines, props, and more for the WNBA playoffs, aka what might be one of the greatest times of the year. And we are back. Here, I'm with Jenn Hatfield. We are breaking down what is potentially going to be the most exciting first-round matchup, a matchup that many folks are saying, oh gosh, why did this have to be in the first round? But anyway, thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. Tomorrow on Saturday, our WNBA draft and pro player development scouting crew are back. They have a new series called WNBA Retrospect. They've been doing these historical scouting evaluations on the best prospects to enter the W in league history in chronological order. And tomorrow, they'll be breaking down the film of one of the greatest current players in the WNBA, and that is Candace Parker. Okay, Jen. So we were talking a bit about the strengths that the Mystics have going into this series. And what exactly did we see on Sunday? How did that play out? The Mystics won this neck-and-neck game on a wild buzzer-beating shot from Brittney Sykes. How did they find a way besides that shot?
Yeah, Sykes was great the whole game long. She's lifted them a lot this season. She's, I think, one of 3 Mystics to play in all 40 games, and that's it. And she's taken up a huge portion of that scoring load while folks were injured. And then, the Mystics found some consistency, which has been a big keyword for them this season. They haven't always been consistent, even at the beginning of the year when they had most of their pieces before the injuries really started to fall like dominoes. They were not consistent even from quarter to quarter. So that's going to be key for this series. They had it on Sunday and it helped them, eke out that win. You could see it too, that focus required to execute that buzzer beater. There were lots of things that went into that. First, Natasha Cloud takes a step back when she's inbounding on the baseline to get a better line of sight over Jonquel Jones guarding the inbounder. Like, imagine how hard it is to inbound a ball over Jonquel Jones. So she has the presence of mind to take a step or two back so she can see. And then Brittney Sykes, before the play starts, she moves Elena Deladon a couple steps down. Elena Deladon's going to set a screen, and moving Elena Deladon down allows Slim to move down a couple steps so that then she ends up with a closer shot than she would have had if she didn't move Elena Deladon down. And then the screens have to be set right. So all of these little things that go into this fantastic shot, which if you didn't see it, you really need to go find it on Twitter. But it's a lob from Natasha Cloud, the inbounder on the baseline, to Brittney Sykes a few steps in from the free throw line for an alley-oop jump shot over Brianna Stewart, which is no small feat. But a lot of executing that play required a lot of focus on the details. And the Mystics haven't always had that, and they had it on Sunday.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I've been in Liberty practice this week, and I spoke to assistant coach Olaf Lang. He sort of said to me, he said, the Mystics were playing like it was the playoffs already, and we were not. So that was definitely a takeaway that he had from that game, in that the Mystics were very focused, but the Liberty were not as focused as they could have been. And
which is maybe a good sign for the Liberty, right?
Maybe. I mean, what I can report is that the Liberty on, I believe it was Monday, on Monday of this week, they had was it Tuesday? Earlier this week, they sat down for one of their culture meetings. They didn't do any on-court work. They had a team meeting. They did some film work. And it was basically their opportunity to reset and sort of lay out expectations, lay out what's different about the postseason and how they have to be more focused. And so a tiny bit of self-promotion here, but my series preview, I wrote about the one word that has kept the New York Liberty together all regular season long. And I imagine it will keep them together through the ups and downs of the postseason. And that word is heart. You can find that at thenexthoops.com. I will also put that in the show notes along with the link to the alley-oop, which just a beautiful, beautiful play. It was really interesting because I spoke to Jonquil Jones, and she sort of said, yeah, it was our fan appreciation afternoon or themed game, and they weren't feeling great about the loss. But then fans waited for 2 hours to get autographs from all the players for the game. It was a very long line. And JJ was sort of like, just seeing all of their faces, talking to them, it just sort of put me onto another level and gave me some more motivation when it comes to this series. And so I thought that was incredibly fascinating. And it's going to be interesting to see, because the thing about the Liberty is that they, in the first half of the season, they won a lot of games by very tight margins. They're a very good clutch team. When situations are high pressure, they do very well. And so that's what makes this whole series just beyond interesting. And so, but Jen, the question I have for you is, this is a 2-7 matchup, but I don't think this is like most 2-7 seed matchups. Why is that the case here?
It's because the Mystics are like maybe the most dangerous 7 seed we've seen ever. Like, I would have to go back through the history books to substantiate that, but they're definitely the most dangerous 7 seed we've seen in a while. These Mystics are mostly healthy, and the reason that they fell to the 7 seed is because they were not mostly healthy for most of the season. So Sandy Brondello even said, when this team's healthy, it's a top 4 seed, and the Mystics see themselves that way too. Sometimes when teams go through injuries and kind of, I don't want to say fumble their way into the playoffs, but like don't perform as they had envisioned during the regular season, sometimes that like kind of beats down on their expectations, and you go, oh, I guess we weren't as good as we thought we were. The Mystics are like, no, we're as good as we thought we were. We just had some really terrible luck, and we can't believe like what happened to us, but we got through it and we're better for it. And so like that's how they're coming in. And I think it's really interesting to hear you talk about like how the Liberty spent this week of practice, because I think that's like kind of an interesting like subplot heading into this series. Like, these two teams played Sunday. They don't play again until Friday. So they've had all these days to kind of like do what they need to do, which is like different for each team, to like figure out how to be at their best. And so often in the WNBA season, like, these teams don't have that kind of time between games. Like, I don't know about for you with the Liberty schedule, but for me, like getting 3 days straight of practice, of media availabilities after practice, I was like, wow, this is strange, because I can't remember the last time we had that. Like, even when there are breaks in the schedule, usually there's like days off in there and that sort of thing. And I'm like, wow, this is kind of neat. So not to go on a complete tangent, but yeah, this is more like a semifinal matchup than a first round matchup. And you said earlier, it's a shame that it's in the first round, and like totally. And also because the first round is only 3 games, like this would be really fun as a 5-game set.
Yes. And that is also something that Olaf Lang said. He said that this is a series that you imagined in a 5-game semifinal series. And it was interesting. I was also talking to assistant coach Zach O'Brien, and I sort of said to him, I said, so for the Liberty, they actually played last year in a 2-7 first round matchup as well against the Chicago Sky. And the Liberty found a way to win that first road game against Chicago, which set up their first playoff game at Barclays Center in franchise history. But the reason I brought it up is because the first round is very much so about winning your home games. It's very much so about starting well. And so I said to Zach O'Brien, I said, so how do you sort of make sure you don't end up like the 2022 Chicago Sky, which Courtney Vandersloot was also a part of? And so the way he laid it out to me is he said, it's all about having the appropriate fear, meaning you have to come in with a certain level of I guess, respect and fear of the opponent, while also being confident in what the team is able to do and what the team's potential has been during the regular season. And so that I found fascinating, just because it's, they clearly understand that if they don't bring the appropriate amount of focus and if they're complacent, this team is too good. The Mystics are too good. And Sandy Brondello, I said to her, so why do you think there's been so much drama that happens when these two teams face off against each other? And so she chuckled and she said, I think that Mystics team is just very motivated to play us. They just love playing us because of the different narratives, which that backs up exactly what you said about Cloud and Brittney Sykes, especially.
Yeah, that's kind of the other thing too, right? Like, and I think you were like kind of alluding to this, like the seeding and the way that this series is structured with 2 games at New York and then 1 at Washington if necessary. Like the Mystics have talked about this. There is no pressure on the Mystics. 0. Like the pressure is on the Liberty right now to win their home games, because otherwise the Mystics have kind of this like card in their back pocket that's like, oh, we're going to our place now. And they're really good at home. So the Mystics are like, yeah, we need to steal one in New York, but like they're the 7 seed, like they're kind of playing with house money here. So I think that's just kind of interesting from a mentality perspective.
For sure. Well, in our final segment, we're going to get into, I don't know, do I call it the spiciest part of our show? Maybe. We're going to get into predictions, which are going to be really difficult. And we're also going to talk about what the keys are on both sides, what some of the potential X factors to this series are. It was interesting. Zach O'Brien said to me, he was like, there are going to be many matchups to watch out for. It's not just going to be one. So we'll get into that too. All right, and we are back to break this down with some keys, X factors, and then finally some predictions. Okay, Jen, I am going to give you the talking stick or the baton, whatever. First, what are your keys for the Washington Mystics in this series?
Yeah, so I laid out 3 keys in my preview, some of which we've already talked about. But the first one I had was just be consistent. And I've talked about that. Like the Mystics have been talking about consistency all season long, and they need to be consistent through 3 games if they want to advance. It's playoff time. The margin for error is smaller. Got to lock in for 40 minutes 3 times in a row. The second one is, the Liberty have a ton of weapons, but 2 in particular that the Mystics really need to contain are Breanna Stewart and Sabrina Ionescu. They've done a really good job on Stewart so far in the regular season. She's scoring under her average and shooting below her usual percentage against the Mystics. And so they need to keep doing what they're doing, but also like they have to do one step better than what they've been doing, right? Because Stewart has had this whole week to watch film and get ready and make adjustments. So they have to continue to kind of stay one step ahead of her. And then Ionescu is a player that they've actually had trouble containing. She's averaging 21 points a game against the Mystics this season, which is kind of surprising when you think about that Mystics backcourt. So they really got to lock in there without, spending so much effort there that they free up somebody else. So I think those are 2 big matchups. And then my last key is kind of a combo platter here. And I know you have thoughts on this too, but I went with the kind of alliterative win the board and bench battles. Rebounding has been kind of a problem for the Mystics all season long, which injuries definitely play a part in that. But they got to be good on the glass. They're going to be at somewhat of a size disadvantage, and they have to really lock in on that. And then just the bench. I talked about earlier, like injuries mean that other players have chances to step up, get confidence, and they need to keep driving that forward and use what they've learned from having to show up in big moments when their teammates are sidelined to be able to step up with their teammates back now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think the Liberty and Mystics benches they're they're not similar when it comes to the types of players they have, but I think what is similar about them is that they have proven WNBA talent coming off the bench. They have players that have played in high-pressure situations, and not all WNBA benches are as proven. Cough, cough, Las Vegas, Dallas. So that, I think, again, with this whole narrative of how well these two teams really play off each other and match up, I think that's definitely a part of it as well. For the Liberty, New York's keys. So I have here, do not stop communicating on defense. And the reason I say this is because watching practice for a couple of days this week, they were working very hard on their defensive scheming, and they're scramming, and they're just covering so much ground, and the switching and the help. And it was just, and in order to be able to execute that properly, because what the Mystics were able to execute very well on Sunday and in some of the earlier matchups this season is they were able to take advantage of the fact that the Liberty have a weaker defense in their backcourt, with the exception of Betnijah Laney. Sabrina Ionescu and Courtney Vandersloot can be inconsistent on defense. I'm not going to say they're bad. I think Sabrina Ionescu has improved. And I think Courtney Vandersloot, similar to Elena Delle Donne, is an underrated defender. But they are not all defense players. That's what I can say. And so Natasha Cloud and Brittney Sykes really took advantage of that, especially on Sunday. And what makes the Liberty's defense work is when they have their back line ready to protect the penetration that comes from the Mystics. And so when you have Jonquel Jones and Brianna Stewart locked in to where they need to be to contest some of those drives and to make those drives more difficult and protect the paint, you get that via the communication. So everyone in that 5-player defense is going to have to contribute. If that means switching at the right time, if that means peeling out and scrambling around, they're going to have to cover a lot of ground, and they only do that by talking. So that's one. 2, establishing Jonquel Jones. As we talked about previously, Jonquel Jones will most likely be matching up against Myisha Hines-Allen, who is 5 inches shorter than JJ is. It's interesting, Jen, because off air we were talking about it when it comes to Myisha Hines-Allen. How are the Mystics approaching that matchup? How are they gonna help Myisha Hines-Allen? Because that's a handful.
Yeah, I asked Elena Delle Donne about this today, actually, from the perspective of, Elena's probably going to be on Stewie. So, do you even want to help in this situation? How's that all going to work? How are you thinking about this? And, she said it starts with everybody being good one-on-one. They don't want to get into a situation where they're over-helping. They're going to have to help. They're going to have to help not only defensively, but rebounding wise. Delle Donne spoke about how the guards are going to have to fly in. Hines-Allen is a good rebounder. She can box out Jonquel Jones if she is, focused and ready to go. But somebody else is going to have to help crash, just given the size difference. So they just need to start with the foundation of really solid one-on-one defense, and then just what I would call intelligent help, knowing when to do it and where it comes from. You're probably not going to send Elena Delle Donne realistically. I'm no tactical expert, but I don't see a situation where you send Elena Delle Donne to leave Brianna Stewart to go help with Jonquel Jones. And Delle Donne talked about too, it might change depending on how the game goes. They might have a plan that they send, this guard to go help, but there's this New York guard who isn't playing that well. And so they're like, oh, okay, we can sag off her and use that defender to go help instead because she's less likely to hurt us right now. So just a little bit of knowing personnel, knowing what's going on, and kind of making reads, right? They're not going to be able to say, this is what we do every time, because New York's going to figure that out really fast. So definitely a balance of trying to keep New York on their toes, but not wanting to, overhelp and get themselves into these like weird switches and rotations.
That's fascinating because these defenses work in very contrasting ways. You noted that they're going to be reliant on one-on-one defense, while the Liberty are all about team defense and being able to rotate and scramble and move quickly, which I find absolutely fascinating. I'd say my third key here.
Sorry, can I just throw in one more thing real quick? I should just say for folks who haven't watched Myisha Hines-Allen, like she's plenty strong enough to go against Jonquel Jones. So if you're like looking at this as a situation where like a 5-inch height difference is going to be just like Jones overpowers Myisha, that's like probably not quite how this is going to go. Like Hines-Allen is like plenty physical to defend Jones or really anyone in this league. So it's just going to be a matter of like, can Hines-Allen do her work early to establish herself and then get help in situations where Jones is likely to just be able to shoot over the top, right? Like, I don't think it's going to be a situation where it's like Jones can always back down Hines-Allen for layups, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely.
So I just wanted to give that context if folks haven't seen Hines-Allen and are imagining a like normal strength 6'1" human instead of like the strongest 6'1" human I've ever seen in my life.
I mean, Myisha's arms are like, she's very strong.
She's very strong. Like she could be the strongest player in the league. Like if we did a league-wide bench press test, like she could win.
And I feel like there is something about Myisha Hines-Allen where she sort of, not that she bulldozes through, but she can, when she is leading the break, she just powers through so many different players.
She's very Alyssa Thomas-esque in that way. If y'all have seen Alyssa Thomas, she is like Alyssa Thomas light, and that's kind of what powered her to being, a 2020 all WNBA type player. So she has that strength. She also, she can use kind of her lower center of gravity defensively against bigger centers to help kind of push them out to places where they may not, be as eager to operate as like straight up on the block. So that's kind of the defensive, that's how they like to use Hines-Allen. She hasn't always, earlier in her career, she wasn't always the most effective with that kind of huge size disadvantage, understandably. But she's gotten more and more effective against those really big centers. Like, she guarded Brittney Griner, so she's really, kind of figured out some things that work for her in there.
For sure. Key number 3 for New York is move the ball, which that is something Sandy Brondello, whenever the Liberty are struggling, she always talks about how much they move the ball or do not move the ball. Mystics have a high pressure defense, as we know, and New York being able to take advantage of that pressure, that aggressiveness, and move the ball, make them rotate, that is what's going to be huge for New York as well. Jen, X factor, or it doesn't have to be a person, but what are you thinking?
That's interesting. I was thinking along the lines of people. So I wonder what it would be if it was something different, but I'll stick with people because that's what I was thinking about. I've talked a lot about Myisha Hines-Allen. I think she will be an X factor, but let me throw out another one because I've spent a lot of time on her. Someone else I would mention is Tiana Hawkins, who could start, but we'll probably see Hines-Allen start and Hawkins come off the bench at the 4. Hines-Allen is just, Hawkins should, for my money, be in the most improved player discussion this year. I don't have a vote, but if I did, she would definitely be in the conversation. She has just been tremendously effective without having plays run for her. She gets her points off rim runs, offensive rebounds, any sort of effort play you can think of, spacing, and she is an underrated asset in the sense that head coach Eric Tebow has talked about how she is one of the Mystics' best players at unsticking their offense when it gets stalled. She knows how to say, move the ball over there and get it going again, get a second action this way. Like if I cut this way, then other people will get moving. She's kind of keeping the trains running a lot and helping them salvage possessions. And then just her effort makes plays on both ends. So, I think the Liberty are going to have to pay attention to her in transition. I don't know what percentage of her baskets she scores by outrunning people in transition, even really athletic fours. So that's something the Liberty are going to have to pay attention to. And she's making a third of her 3-pointers. She really just, she's kind of like a piece of clay that the Mystics can mold into whatever they need that day. She can play multiple positions at 6'3". So I don't know exactly how she will make the biggest impact on this series, because there are a lot of ways that she could, but look for her to in some form.
Ooh. That, man, I have a bunch of potential X factors on here, but based on what you said about Tiana Hawkins, I'm almost sort of looking for that cop out of just saying the New York Liberty bench, because the 3 players that most likely will be coming off the New York Liberty bench are going to be Kayla Thornton, Stephanie Dolson, and Marine Johannes, and they all bring something different in that Kayla Thornton takes a lot of pride in guarding Elena Delle Donne. Let me tell you, she knows how to defend her very well. She has spent a lot of time watching Elena Delle Donne film. And so to have a player like that who is so locked in defensively and who, like Tiana Hawkins, creates a lot on just effort plays and creates a lot of extra possessions. In Stephanie Dolson, you have someone who is basically coaching everyone on the floor alongside Courtney Vandersloot. She is talking a lot. I spoke earlier about how the Liberty are going to have to communicate really well. Stephanie Dolson is an excellent on-floor communicator. And obviously she screens very well. She makes it very difficult for defenders to get over those screens. And then with Marine Johannes, she can just, Becky Hammond said it best. She can just sort of come in, score 8 points in like the blink of an eye, and then she's out of the game, and you're like, 8 points? What happened? How did this happen? So I think it's the Liberty getting quality production from all 3 of those folks coming off the bench. That's going to be key. And that's a lot of the times the advantage that they have over a lot of teams. Okay, Jen, we're almost.
I'll also say real quick, if Shakira Austin, who is guaranteed to miss the first 2 games, but TBD for the third, if the Mystics win a game in New York and there's a game 3 and Shakira Austin plays, I think that is like almost in the dictionary under X Factor, right? A player coming back from injury for an elimination game at home, that could be extremely interesting. So we'll consider that a potential X factor pending results of medical testing.
Well,
typical, very appropriate for the Mystic season. We need to caveat an X factor with if she's healthy.
Oh my gosh. Well, okay. We're running out of time, but before we do sign off, let's get quick predictions. I'll go first and you will close us out. My prediction is that the New York Liberty win this in 2 in Brooklyn, but it's not going to be easy. Both games are going to be grinded out games. These are going to be games that are won in clutch time. Jen.
You're really putting me on the spot here. Maybe we ran out of time for this. I think the biggest loser in this series is going to be the coach's blood pressure, to be honest, to your point about these games being close. But you're going to make me pick. I suppose I'll give the Mystics a little more bulletin board material here. I will say Liberty in 3. But I just want to make that clear that me picking the Liberty does not mean that I don't think the Mystics can win this series. I absolutely do think they can win this series. I'm just going to go with the team that's been consistent most of the year over a team that is still kind of talking about, trying to find it. And I think they can find it, but I think the Liberty's body of work is enough for me to tilt this prediction in their favor ever so slightly.
We both had quite the nuanced predictions. thank you for making Locked On Women's Basketball your first listen every day. I want to give a huge shout out and thank you to Jenn Hatfield for hopping on the show today. Follow her on all the interwebs. You can see it if you were watching on YouTube. It is at JENNHATFIELD1. And read her work at the next Hoops. And tomorrow, come back and hear our staff talk all about how much of an elite prospect Candace Parker was. But for now, this is Jackie Powell.
And I'm Jenn Hatfield.
And we are signing off. Have a good weekend and enjoy this series.
Ogunbowale for the win.
You are Locked On Women's Basketball, your daily podcast on women's basketball.